What's up, Sixers fans? This is Zach Chavalella here with my guy Justin Crosby for another episode of Still Processing, a 76ers podcast. The return. We have, I don't even know how long it's been. A couple months. Who knows? It's been a minute. That's what we know, but we're back. That's what matters. A few different changes around here in the Still Processing territories. You'll notice that our good friend Sam DiGiovanni is not with us today. Because he has been promoted to coach, and now Coach DiGiovanni is on to brighter pastures. So we still got a lot of love for Sam. He will check in. He'll be on the pod for sure. Still a good friend of the pod. But moving forward, it's back to Justin and I, and we're here to talk some Sixers with you guys. So looking forward to is probably a little on the bright side. We are here to discuss some Sixers, go over the season a bit. But we are looking forward to hearing your takes, hearing what you have to say about the team this season and where they can go from here. So first and foremost, Justin, my man, how you doing?
Regular life, I'm doing well. Sixers land, nothing to feel good about at this point. So that's it,
I
man.
feel that for sure, for sure. Yeah, it's man, there's been so many funny conversations had professionally, privately, personally, and just a lot of people checking on the welfare of those who are either fans of the team or have to watch the team professionally or whatever in that case. So that's just the kind of year that it's been for Philadelphia. And for those who want to relive the Sixers season so far, which I imagine is the bulk of Sixers fans, the team is 3-13 on the season. That is less than ideal. Not exactly what was expected when the team signed Paul George, Caleb Martin, re-signed Kelly Oubre, brought back Andre Drummond, and so on and so forth, right? So entering with championship aspirations, best team in the East outside of Boston, undeniably, what could possibly go wrong? Turns out just about everything. So again, team is 3-13. Only wins so far have come against the Pacers, the Hornets, and the Brooklyn Nets most recently this past Friday. Not exactly world beaters, any of those teams either. So really kind of just beating up the the rest of the undersized kids at the playground, as it were, for Philadelphia. Not a great season, but of course it's early. The team is only, I want to say, 7 games back of the 3 seed, which is kind of the tiresome optimistic viewpoint that people keep mentioning. But it is also the reality is that it's a long season. Tyrese Maxey was saying that just last night. It's an 82 game grind, and we'll see where the team goes from here. But we're going to talk a little bit about what will go into the team turning things around, but also what has led them to this point so far. But let's look at these 3 wins and maybe kind of go a little bit high-low here. Justin, what would you say sticks in your mind in terms of bright spots this young season?
I mean, obviously, the bright spot is rookie Jerry McCain. His play has, since early on in the season, he's come on the last 2 weeks. I'm outside of his performance last night, but everybody has an off night. But he's been tremendous, like a real bright spot. Early on, we didn't think he may play as much, but at this point now, he's solidified his role on his team. They really need him, especially with their stars being out. Like all 3 of their other stars have been out one point and another, and now 2 stars are out again. So he's been a godsend for a team. And I'm gonna be honest, if Jerry McCain hasn't been playing like he was playing as the bright spot that he's been, they might not have any wins. Let's be real. Maybe one. Maxey won them that game in Indiana, but he's been the bright spot. Picked at 16. It looks like so far, the Sixers picking outside the lottery, picking in front of the Heat, and outside of the lottery, picking an undersized guard seems to work in their favor. So he's been really one of the only bright spots. There's been one more, but maybe we could talk about that later. But yeah, that's my bright spot. How about yours?
Yeah, we may end up kind of talking about it now, but when we look at the bright spots, and obviously Jared McCain, like you said, like, listen, man, this kid. I just got to talk about this kid for a second because this kid is something that I came into the season, and I'm not trying to, be one of those. There's a lot of people trying to rewrite history, saying like, "Oh, I believed in Jared McCain since he was born," and that's not what I'm trying to be here. But I am willing to admit that I was high on McCain, and that most of it, a good bit of it, came from my Duke bias as a Duke fan. I was pretty happy with the selection. I felt pretty confident in it, even with and Justin, you and I were both there draft night. We were at the facility, with the team, with the beat reporters, and the conversation. Obviously, Dalton Knecht, Jared McCain, this and that, and Tristan Da Silva was a guy who kept coming up, and the vibes even before the draft. Whether you're talking about the fans or even the beat, the beat, other beat reporters on the scene. A lot of people talking about, well, they're probably going to trade, not necessarily trade the pick then and there, but whoever they get, they're probably going to trade come mid-season, right? So that was kind of the conversation, almost that it didn't matter. For me personally, again, I watched the kid at Duke. It was only 1 year, but come 20 time, small sample size, but man, did he had some of this stuff at Duke, and he is just taking it exponentially to the next level at the NBA level. So it's super exciting to see. He's a very chill guy, super down to earth. Even last night after the loss, we had a chance to talk to him in the locker room, and it's just, listen, the kid's a worker. What can you say? Nick Nurse had some high things to say about him. I put an article of that on phillysportsnetwork.com. So, check that out if you want to read more on him. But we're going to have plenty of opportunities to talk Jared this season. But you're right. He is for sure a bright spot this season. The guy who I'm really excited about, and it's not that there's one guy. Obviously, I'm excited about Jared. But we got to talk about some Gershon Yabusele, man. Just this, listen, coming into the season, the Olympics, right? Let's start even before the season. Everyone's like, Gershon Yabusele, yeah, he played. I remember him playing in Boston. Yeah, what happened to him? Oh, he's with France now. He's been overseas. He's been playing Real Madrid past few years. Well, then they watch this French team, and my goodness, is this one tough son of a bitch? This guy, absolutely, just the way he played the U.S., the way he played through the entire Olympic Games, thoroughly impressive. The 3-point shot looked real, which he had a lot of issues when he played in the NBA. That was among them, was that he couldn't, as an undersized guy, he couldn't stretch the floor. Well, now you watch how he played in France. Tough, energetic, stretched the floor. And the next thing you know, he's signing with the Philadelphia 76ers. It's like, oh, yeah, you had a couple roster spots left. Throw a flyer on a guy. Sounds like a good idea. Gershon Yabusele has been one of the few Sixers, really two Sixers, including himself and Jared McCain, who have exceeded expectations this season. He has been phenomenal. He has been to the point where he's one of the few guys who Nick Nurse has reason to go out of his way to praise. Now, Nick has, publicly has the back of all his players. It's not that kind of, like, this is a different kind of praise. Like, you listen to Nick talk about Gershon, the things that he appreciates about him, you just see the growth that Gershon has experienced in his time away from the NBA. And the guy is super jovial. They call him the dancing bear. Like, he kind of has like that kind of personality, where he's a real, I think he's just a happy guy, but he's also, I almost stole a term from the Rights Ricky Sanchez podcast, but he's an instigator too. He's a grimy, hard fighting dude as well. And so I'm happy to see Gershon have this kind of success. What have you seen from Gershon Yabusele this season, Justin?
Just his versatility on the offensive end. I mean, he was thrust into the small ball 5 role, but his versatility on just able to play the 4 to 5. He looks good in both, a majority of matchups. Of course, like against a center like Zubac, it was a little harder for him to defend, but switchability, his shooting has been, much of a surprise. Like, I think he's hit 5 threes twice already this season, which is something that's very surprising. What you said before, that the shooting was one of the things that kind of knocked him out the league. Was his inability to shoot. So to be able to improve that much, he has his hot spots. The left wing, the top of the key. He can hit from the corner. I like the fact that he's physical. He could drop to the rim. He's sneaky athletic. I mean, anybody in the NBA is athletic, but if you plan around, he can dunk on you real quick. So, that's definitely been one of the surprising things. And what looked like to be like a depth signing has turned out to be someone who's really important to this team going forward this season. So, they signed him for a 1 year deal. He's actually playing like way better than whatever the vet minimum he got, and I'm sure he'll get paid, if not by the Sixers, but by somebody else next season. Um, I don't know if he's playing himself into a mid-level situation, but definitely more money than he's gotten this year from the Sixers. So definitely one of the only bright spots, outside of McCain. And hopefully, I'm sure there's a roster remake maybe coming in the near future, and I'm sure he'll be somebody who's earned the ability to, try to help this roster turn it around.
Yeah, I think this is a guy who it's going to be difficult in the offseason to try and retain him, but I think that we're going to see Philadelphia try any way that they can to bring him back, because it's very clear the kind of difference that he can make, and that he does make really on a nightly uh, nightly basis for Philadelphia. So I do have here some words that Nick Nurse had to share about Gershon Yabusele. Uh, I'll have video in the future, so that's one of the benefits of being down there, is that I do have plenty of video of this, but just with this being a work in progress, our first game back as it is, we got to ramp up. You guys know how that is, Sixers fans. So we'll have video in the future, but for now, Nick Nurse on Gershon Yabusele and his performance so far this season. So uh, Nick says here that the thing about him is that he doesn't make very mistakes. Right? He's solid. He also provides good 3-point threat. He did start the game a couple games ago. He gave them a lift. This is when Nick Nurse went to Gershon over Andre Drummond in the starting lineup, when it was announced half hour before the game that Joel Embiid was not going to be playing. This is against the Brooklyn Nets. So he says, I thought he gave us a great lift. He's pretty good, safe pair of hands, getting the ball transferred around when things are going on too. He plays hard. Yeah, he's a smart guy. He plays hard. And then he's really solid. And then you throw in when he can post here and there, chuck a three. He's playing pretty solid. I think both the last two games, he comes in, provides energy, some youthful, fresh legs, and obviously kind of needing that lately. Nurse said about Yabusele, just some speed in general and athleticism. And then listen, that's I think high praise from Nick Nurse. I think it describes Yabusele perfectly. There's not a lot of guys providing that for Philadelphia right now, which is part of the frustration, is that the energy level is just not where it frankly needs to be for this team, and it's understandable. You're 3-13 on the season, not that's far from ideal. You're dealing with headlines constantly discussing the negativity around your team. You have a team meeting that's leaked the very next day. I mean, it's been one thing after another. You have a bunch of guys who were brought in to play around one specific guy who's only suited up a handful of times this season, and now, and we'll discuss this in a little bit, who knows how many more games this season he is going to suit up. So definitely a frustrating time for Sixers players, for Sixers fans. Gershon Yabusele has for sure been a bright spot there. But now we got to turn negative. Right now we got to talk about what has been the biggest disappointment of this offseason. Justin, what are you thinking, man?
I mean, where do we want to start? I'm gonna be honest. Where do we want to start? I honestly think you can go to the obvious, right? Like injuries and games played and all that stuff. But the biggest disappointment to me is, and just the lack of like energy and play hard that we've seen. Like this team, and not everybody on this team was on the team last year, but there's enough guys on this team last year to understand what they need to do when Joel is out. Now they weren't super successful when Joel was out last season, but they know how to play, without Joel, and just the lack of like play hard that we get when the stars aren't in is like the most like disappointing for me, because they have had some winnable games without Paul George, without Embiid, without Max, without all three, whatever. They've had some winnable games, and I just feel like the lack of energy sometimes, and the ability to play hard every possession, I think has hurt them, and it's going to continue to hurt them. They got to climb out of a hole at this point. And I mean, I know we'll get deeper into that, but that's been like my biggest disappointment. You can go to all the injuries and all that stuff, but it's just like the lack of them playing as hard. Like you can see it on the court. Like Zach, I know you were there Sunday. Yeah, yesterday, and I know you saw it in the first quarter. The second quarter just seemed like disinterested. And I know when I was there at the Memphis game, and we all know what happened after that game, but that was a situation where same thing in the second half. It just seems like it's just everybody comes in and knows all they got to do is play harder, and that's it. So that's been a disappointment for me, and that's been my biggest disappointment.
Yeah, the energy level's been really frustrating for this team, and again, like the reasons for it are there. And you mentioned the Memphis game, and I actually think about the second Memphis game, right? With when Joel came back, the more recent Memphis game, and how it looked for a moment that they did find that fight, but they let themselves get into too big of an initial hole against another team that's dealing with some extreme injuries, right? Obviously, Memphis had a lot of injuries that first game that they played in Philadelphia, but additionally, they had a lot of injuries second game as well. I mean, John Morant was out, Marcus Smart was out. A good chunk of the team, really reliable players. And I get that Desmond Bain came back for that game, but there was still quite a few players on Memphis missing. So to come that close, but then still ultimately falter, just that was just really frustrating. So it seemed like they were kind of uh, turning over that new leaf, and then to just get steamrolled by Miami following, as well, right around that time after Orlando was just it was frustrating, right? And for me, I wasn't down there in Miami, but talking to some of the beats who were, obviously that was the night of the meeting. You're waiting around for well over an hour for Nick Nurse to address the media. Just not, and I'm not one of those guys. Let me just say first and foremost, like I understand the blessing that it is to cover a professional sports team for a living. I'm never going to be that guy who sits there waiting to talk to somebody and says, like, what the hell's going on? I got better things to do, whatever. Like, yeah, I do have plenty of stuff to do, but listen, there's times where you gotta kind of suck it up, and we can wait. We're all adults, and they have to take care of what they're taking care of. And if it pays off, I'd rather they do it so that I can write about a better product, than I'm not the kind of guy. I'm the guy who wants to write about great things happening in Philadelphia. I'm not the guy who wants to write about the catchiest thing or this or that. So for me, if it helps them get through it, that's great. Problem is, doesn't really seem like that meeting did a whole heck of a lot, you know? Austin Krell of On Pattinson asked Nick just last night, about now 3 games removed from that meeting and what has really changed. Effectively nothing, And part of that is Joel, going out again, which is frustrating, and part of that is Paul George being hurt, which, yeah, again, is frustrating. But there's there's gonna be frustrations throughout the season, and it's not that everything is kind of working against Philadelphia, which I think you can say, like, there's been a impressive amount of unfortunate circumstances surrounding this team. But the issue is that there is still more that can be done by this team, by this organization, and it's just not been. And I think that's been my biggest disappointment is that they're not adjusting in the proper way. And I think that kind of starts with Nick Nurse, who I think if I have to call out a single person, not that I'm calling for his job, I think that we're well before that considering the circumstances, but I think that he's been a major disappointment this season, and I'm surprised to be saying that, just 16 games into the year, but there's not been that performance that I would have expected, just knowing Nick the way that I do. I expected more, frankly. So, Justin, any thoughts on Nick Nurse before we move on?
Yeah, I know Nick Nurse has talked about just like I think the meeting and everything like that, and even like I go to Joel's talking about like how he took what was said about him in a good manner, but sometimes he's confused about what he's supposed to do on the court. I just think Nick Nurse was hired. Everybody said he's great at adjustments and stuff like that, and he showed that he can do that, right? But it seemed like so far this season that has been a struggle for him and his coaching staff to adjust to whatever's happening. Specifically on offense, where this team just literally looks like most nights it look like really bottom of the league in offense. And maybe some of the stuff I know he's mentioned he's had vanilla stuff going because two main hubs of the offense are out and have been out for a while, back and forth. So it's like, what can you really run when you have a lot of your offense based on those two guys? I get that, but just better adjustment on offense. The way the Clippers, perimeter defense and the defensive philosophy shut the Sixers down yet last night. It's like, adjustments have to be made. And I think from Nick Nurse standpoint, just expected a little bit more from him. He's, still a good coach. I think he's, known for his X's and O's and, you know, his he's been talked about how his defensive schemes are good and offensively he's been good, and the reason he got a job in the NBA I think is because of his offense. um so I don't know, that's been something where just a little concerning for my eyes, and I hope to see some changes made once or whenever this roster can be whole again for more than 2.5 games or 6 minutes. I think they've only played 6 minutes together, all three. So, we'll see.
Absolutely. J Fizz checking in. What's up, J Fizz? Sam Cassell would never. I got a lot of love for Sam Cassell. I'm gonna hit that with the old no comment for now, but I got a lot of love for Sam, and who knows what happens from here. But I do think that Nick has the ability to turn this around. I think there's certain things that he's just for whatever reason, maybe he feels as though I think he just disagrees with the philosophy of what I'm about to say, and this really kind of gets to the key of what he has to do. And we're going to kind of jump around here, but we'll talk about this a little bit actually. But he needs to figure out how to find some kind of consistency with this team. Before we get into that, just to kind of give some people a perspective into some of the things that's seen behind the scenes that's not necessarily seen, you know, when you're watching the games either in person or whether you're watching, from home on TV, whatever. Uh when you look at these guys, the frustration that this team feels is real. Like so the one thing I want to and I'm not trying to assure you so you feel better about this at least like these are guys who care. Kelly was talking in the locker room last night and Kelly's had a tough season. I don't think anyone would tell you that he has been he has been as successful as expected this year on either side of the ball, right? This man was this he was feeling it, you know, he's frustrated, and I don't even mean angry per se, you know, just more so, this is a guy who he's not satisfied with the contract that he got, and what I mean by that is, you know, this wasn't a guy who was playing up a level because he was trying to get paid, and now he's paid, and now he's happy, like, this is a guy who wants this team to succeed far more than they currently are, and he's truly feeling it that they're not. So, uh, that's not gonna make anyone better that he wants that to happen. The fans want that to happen. Nick wants that to happen. Daryl Morey wants that to happen. Doesn't matter. What matters is what are you gonna do to get it to happen, right? So, with Kelly, I mean, it's tough because he's one of those guys in particular. We talked about guys kinda playing around Joel, who he thrives when he's working within the confines of a specific role, right? And this goes back to Nick Nurse a little bit with the uncertain roles as well. Kelly's not able to play that role without Joel anchoring the paint, without Joel taking up as much real estate as he does offensively. And Kelly's not able to play the same way he did in the dunker spot and catch and shoot threes as he has. And so it leads to, you know, the term that I don't even know who to credit because I feel like a lot of people have used it at this point, you know. It leads to Kelly ball, right? Which is not what the team needs to win. Excuse me. It's not what the team needs to win, but it's what Kelly feels like he has to do because there's no other option. Justin, what have you seen from Kelly this year?
I've seen confusion overall with his role. I've seen one thing about Kelly that I really notice is, I mean, he last year he wasn't a good shooter, but just his indecisiveness from the perimeter. He doesn't have a lot of confidence shooting. I think he's shooting a career low like 27% from three, something like that, 28% from three. Kelly has trouble making decisions with the ball in his hands. And he's a player who, like you said, is better at confines of the system, cutting, driving, shooting open corner threes, stuff like that. And I just feel like him, you know, he's a super energy guy. He goes to the rim with authority. I'm not, you know, you see it here and there, but I'm not seeing much of that. And I think it just has to do with role and confidence. Like Kelly coming off a year where, you know, he was a vital part, and maybe originally he wasn't planning on being a vital part, right? But you know, you expected him to be the fifth guy, maybe whatever, but he turned out to be the third guy on most nights because of the play of Tobias Harris. He didn't live up to the expectations in his final year, so you know, I just feel like Kelly's role changes all the time. He goes in and out from starter to bench player, and I probably think he's better off the bench being a spark. But you know, this season, you know, you see him, he has a lot of minutes. You see him, he doesn't play a lot. So I just feel like it's, you know, he's just struggling this year, and he still has time to, you know, turn it around, especially when the guys get back. But, you know, it's a little concerning.
Yeah, it's definitely concerning. And listen, with Kelly, it's probably not going to get better until Joel comes back. And so that's the biggest issue is, you know, well, when does Joel come back? Even if PG comes back, I don't know if that solves it for Kelly. Just thinking about the nature of the position and there. But uh the one thing that I do know is that listen, Kelly's not, you know, he's not satisfied. He's not quitting on the team. Uh, and I think that's the case for a lot of these guys. You know, Tyrese, who's certainly feeling the frustration this season. You know, he constantly talks about how the grind can't stop for this team. You know, you have to give 100% effort 100% of the time. Uh, you know, you have to keep fighting. You have to keep pushing. That's something that's a sentiment that's been shared by Gershon Yabusele. It's been, uh, you know, shared by Jared McCain, who is wise beyond his years for a rookie player at the NBA level. So that message is there throughout the team. So this isn't a group of guys who's, satisfied or not overly concerned. This is a team who uh, they understand that they're not playing satisfactory. But like I said, the problem is that now you have to actually show the improvement. You have to take the steps necessary. But Jay Fizz checking back in, talking about PG. This is a good conversation actually to talk about real quick. The idea of bringing in PG. And I know Jay Fizz was against it from the start. We've had conversation. Can't remember who was actually on this pod or flipping the birds because Jay Fizz is a good and true fan all the way around. But talking about PG and his benefit, like ideally, like I think you're looking at a situation where the expectation was like, well, we can get PG for like 50 to 60 games, right? And at that point, you're looking at a 3-level scorer who can play off ball, on ball, who can play two-way. You don't necessarily need him to be your top defender. You don't need him to be the point of attack defender either, but he can play offense, he can play defense, and somebody who can just take some pressure off of Joel and Tyrese. Basically, an effective Tobias Harris is what they were looking for. Problem is, it doesn't look like you're getting 50, 60 games out of Paul George, at least the way that the season has started. Now, hopefully, he's set to only miss 2 games. Hopefully, he's back starting Wednesday against Houston. We're expecting to hear about that tomorrow. Sixers are holding practice, so I should have an update for everybody around the afternoon tomorrow on both PG and Joel Embiid. And honestly, I'm a little bit more worried about Joel Embiid than I am about Paul George, but it doesn't seem encouraging that he suffered the same injury twice already this young into the season, right? So this was part of the risk when you made the move, building around Joel and Paul George. It's a lot of risk. I truly, even to this day, still believe the reward is worth it. And it's something that we're not going to be able to see for probably a couple months. But once these guys get some games under their belt together, I think that we're going to be looking at a far better team than we are right now. It's just how many games can they get together? How many games can they get total? And can they do enough to work their way to the playoffs? And that's unfortunately the conversation now is not contention, it's the playoffs. But Justin, what do you think?
I mean, I agree. Paul George was expected to come in and on most nights probably be the third scorer, um, and just contribute while one of those guys on the bench be that second option when Max here and being on the bench. And some nights he's gonna have it going. We've seen him have it going maybe twice. He's had it going, especially that I think that Knicks game he really had it going. So that's kind of what you expect to him from him. I say like I was expecting not like one every 5 games or something like that. But in general, it's been underwhelming. The injury is, it is what it is. We can talk about that another time, but that's obvious. But just I don't know. It seems like him and this entire team missed the most wide open shots that rim in and out. Like I don't know what it is, but I expected a little bit more from him. I expected him to play much better. I would say every 3 out of every 5 games have a good game, and then maybe disappear every once a week or something like that. That's what I was really looking at. But I mean, hopefully we can get extended time with him on the court, extended time when he's not on minutes restrictions. Like who knows if he's going to be on minutes restriction when he comes back. It's you're saying that it's only going to be 2 games, and we all heard that right when it was announced. But who knows with the Sixers? Like who knows if he's going to play on Wednesday or not? They're talking about he got on the court on Saturday. So what is it going to take for him to get back on the court? Does he have to go through practice? Like who knows, right? And I know you'll find out tomorrow at practice, but it's just interesting to me that so far, like him and Kawhi have been on the same path as far as with the
Yeah.
Clippers and the Sixers, but
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
I've been
I'll say
overwhelmed with
this
Paul George.
too. I'll say this too. What's interesting, kind of to your point about, we've heard them say 2 games, but who really knows? Uh, talking to Nick Nurse, or I guess I should say listening to Nick Nurse, I wanna say he said this pregame, uh, before the Nets game on Friday, but whenever he said it, he mentioned that when PG went out, he actually it might have been postgame in Memphis. He actually was getting ready, testing it out, and possibly gonna go in for the second half or go back in the second
Right.
half, I should say, in Memphis, against the Grizzlies.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen, and then he's missing 2 games at least. Joel Embiid, all set to play, and this is a whole different league of conversation. Uh, Set to play against the Brooklyn Nets on Friday, 30 minutes before the game. Well, I guess the day of, it's found out that he's questionable. A couple hours, Nick Nurse tells us that he's going to go through his normal warm-ups, and he'll either play or he won't based on how he feels then. Joel never came out for warm-ups, and then a half hour before the game, it's found out that he was ruled out. So, then you find out later that he's gonna miss also 2 games, possibly more with the swelling in his knee. I mean, there's no consistency, and I'm starting to wonder, not even starting to wonder, 'cause I there are things that I have been told, things that I am aware of. Uh, I know it's not just a transparency issue. Uh, that being said, how do you fix it, right? That's kind of the bigger problem. And listen, there's a lot of problems going on in Philadelphia right now. I think you kind of have to take them one by one. You're not going to fix everything in one day. For now, let's just get the guys back on the court. Let's get them healthy, and then we can focus moving forward on how to best handle the clarity of this time miss moving forward.
And I'll say this, I'll jump in real quick. And I think that the issue is, and again, uh was it Shams who came out and said that Joel affects how they talk about his injuries, how it's presented to the media. I believe Shams said that.
I
But
would imagine it was Shams, yeah.
yes. So my thing is with the injury or injuries, I feel like this team has in general, whether it's Joel, and it's mostly been around Joel, but they have earned no goodwill from the fans or media for that matter for to take what they say at face value and be transparent. They have not earned any goodwill on that. And for I'm sure just like everybody else, people covering the team, fans, they're like, we'll see it when we see it. Like if he comes back and Paul George comes back in 2 games, cool. But everybody's like, whatever, we'll see him when we see him again. Same thing with Joel. They said he'll miss at least 2 games. But then, you hear from Nurse that he still has swelling in his knee. That doesn't sound like he's going to be playing anytime soon. So they have done no favors in how things have been portrayed to the media, and to the fans, and they're going to continue to have this. Everybody's going to continue to have this nonchalant attitude around the injury portion and his team until the team is more transparent and the team plays better. And I'm not saying it's on Joel specifically, like he's hurt. It is what it is. If it's the injury, the meniscus injury and everything like that, and he got the specific surgery that they say he got, he may be having issues with bone on bone, and he's going to have swelling from time to time. I mean, he's running up and down the court all the time, playing 30 something minutes. I can only imagine, he's going to have swelling. They're going to deal with it. But at the end of the day, you know, this hole, we'll pick it up. We'll try to dig out this hole. Yeah, there's going to be too much to dig out of, and April is not even going to matter if you can't make it to the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. The thing that I will say about Joel's knee, and listen, at this time, I'm not going to comment on the injury things like with Joel. Like, there's Cham said what he said, and obviously he's got his connections, he's got his sources.
Mhm.
What I will say is that with this type of injury, it's not, and I guess what I should say is condition, right? Because we're really talking about a knee condition at this point. He doesn't
Correct.
still have a torn meniscus.
Right.
Um, he's dealing with the after effects
Everyday
of
wear and tear.
everyday wear and tear, years of specific damage to that knee. With the meniscus, it's not like something that you repair, right? The players are getting portions cut off, basically, right? And I think it's only recently that there have started to be successful surgeries of transplants,
Transplant.
uh,
Yeah.
which it is not even to said, like they're happening. They're not necessarily happening for 7-foot professional basketball players. Like it's a
Exactly.
whole different ball game, man. Right. So, uh,
Exactly.
there's not a clear cut solution, and it's the kind of thing where it kind of just grades on you every day, right? So Joel's probably going to deal with pain in that knee for the rest
A
of his
lot.
life.
Hmm.
It's just about what can he do to manage the swelling in that knee, to manage the pain and fight through it, right? And there's a certain times where you have to fight through pain, and there's other times where it's unwise, and frankly you're unable to, like, this is not like oh, it's some kind of stinging sensation and whatever. Like, no, dude, like it hurts. Like,
Hmm.
as someone who has had something that is not even nearly as severe as this problem to their own left knee, like, I can tell you, like, it's not fun. Like, and there's times where, like, and my bad days don't come nearly as often as Joel's, just because I'm not doing nearly the stuff that Joel is. I never will be. I never could. So for a guy like that who's been through so much more, who continues to go through so much more and try and do so much more, I can't even imagine, if I'm being flat honest with you. So, like, I'm not trying to say that Joel is completely blameless. I'm not trying to say that he can do whatever he wants with regards to this injury. What I am trying to say is that this is going to be an issue for the rest of his career, more likely than not, and it's frankly something that both the fan base and he needs to get accustomed to,
Yep.
and he needs to figure out how to best manage this as he can to maximize the games that he can play, also in the regular season, not just the postseason, because the regular season does matter, because without it, you can't get to the postseason. But we're gonna move forward here a little bit. Obviously, we've talked about um, how the team can turn it around, starting with getting healthy. They have to be able to lean on the young guys. I feel like we've talked about that a little bit. Probably save that for a future pod. Talk a little bit more about Maxi, talk a little bit more about McCain. Um, the biggest thing, and we've already talked about this, so we won't spend too much time on it. Nick Nurse needs to figure out a consistent rotation. This has been my biggest criticism of him throughout this season. Is and to start off the year, it actually started in the preseason. We saw a lot of lineup changes happening in the preseason, and that makes sense. Listen, so it's almost a completely brand new team, a lot of new parts supposed to play important roles, right? So you have to try some things, figure out what works. The problem is that never stopped, right? So now we're 16 games into the season, and guys frankly don't know what their role is. Guys don't know what the expectations are for them individually. Guys don't know their place on this team, right? And I'm not talking about Tyrese Maxey. I'm not talking about Jared McCain, and I'm not even talking about Gershon Yabusele, who his biggest thing is, oh wow, well, I've been thrust into the starting lineup, and now I'm one of the three most important players on the team this season. Like, I'm talking about the guys who came in here with certain expectations, a lot of the vets who this team and this season is not only not meeting those expectations, it's not even being clear about the ask, right? And so Nick Nurse needs to figure out, who are my guys that I'm going to roll with without Joel Embiid, right? And who are my guys who I'm going to roll with in general? Because the answer, first of all, it can't be that different between with Embiid and not. the way that you play will be different. The people who are in your rotation, you're gonna have to figure out a way to play with them without Embiid, if that makes sense, right? So if it's Kyle Lowry, which I know he's hurt right now, then it's Kyle Lowry, right? In that rotation. I'm talking bench too. If it's Andre Drummond, playing in a specific role, like figure out what Andre Drummond's role is, right? Do you want him to uh, fill in for the starter for Joel when he's out? Do you want him just to focus on that bench role? Do you want him to be that guy setting screens? Do you want him to be a dirty work guy, or do you want him, working high actions, in the pick and roll with Maxey and McCain? What do you want from him? That's what you need to convey. And it's the same thing for a guy like Eric Gordon. Like, are you just looking at Eric Gordon just to shoot open threes? That obviously hasn't gone well this season, but are you looking for him to be an additional ball handling presence out there on the court? Are you looking for him to be a consistent 10 to 12 minutes a night, 10 to 16 even? Like what role do you have for him other than, well, sometimes he plays and sometimes he doesn't? Ricky Council, same thing. And I think a lot of that's on Ricky, who unfortunately I think has regressed a little bit this season, just not taking the wisest of shots, and his physicality is a bit down from last year. Uh, so what really is his role as well? So you have to kind of go through player by player on this team and figure out well, who's a part of the rotation, what's their role, and you have to set that expectation. That's the problem, is there's no expectation being set, and it's these players who are the ones who are going out. They're struggling because there's no message relayed on that. And then they get all the blame because they're the guys on the court. So, it's fair, to say that, and this goes back to the meeting the Sixers players had with the coaching staff. Like, it's fair for the coaching staff to be like, oh, well, we need you guys to play harder. We need you to do more. It's like, all right, well, tell them what to do. That's the problem in hand. And the fact that so many players have voiced both privately and publicly that opinion, and I'm not just talking about voice that, the way that Joel Embiid did, or the way that it was brought out, right, when the meeting leaked. I'm not just talking about the players themselves confronting the coaches on this, but like there's been other conversations. Like, this is clearly an issue throughout the locker room that guys don't understand, and it's not even a matter of not being satisfied with their role. Like, if it was that easy, you could say, "Oh, well, you're not playing well," like, so you don't have that consistent of a role. Like, that happens in basketball, but that's not the case at all. The case is, well, one night a guy's playing 0 minutes, and the next night he's playing 20 plus. And guys don't know what's going into this. They don't know the methodology, and no one knows what their actual role is on this team. That's a major issue, and I get it. When you start a season, you have a lot of new moving parts. You have to try some things to start. However, at a certain point, you have to figure out what's the best combination and roll with it, right? And if you don't have Joel Embiid, that sucks. I'm sorry for you. Doesn't matter. You have to figure out what the best combination is, roll with it, and you have to have an offensive strategy and run actions that make sense in a world without Joel Embiid. You cannot have Andre Drummond run the offense the same way that Joel Embiid does. You cannot even have Gershon Yabusele doing the same things that Joel Embiid does. You have to allow Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, Paul George, for that matter, play in a way that best suits their strengths in the minutes they are not playing with Joel Embiid, whether he is not in the game because he's on the bench or whether he's injured. Whatever the case is, you're going to have to figure out how to maximize your guys, because that's your job as the coach. Justin, time's yours. What do you think about Nick Nurse and what he can do and figure out this consistent rotation?
I mean, first of all, you hit on everything, but he has to have those conversations with those guys. Like you said, you got to pick guys to just go with it. Like you mentioned, Ricky Council. He doesn't know any like what night he's going to be called upon, what opportunities he's going to get. So yeah, when he goes out there, he may be pressing a little bit or taking bad shots or whatever the case may be. But I think it has a lot to do with the inconsistencies of the veterans that they were going to rely upon at the beginning of the season. Eric Gordon has not showed up, as much as they would have anticipated. I mean, Kyle Lowry is injured right now, and I love, Lowry, but he hasn't performed that well either thus far this season. So I think some of those veteran guys that they depended on are not performing to the best of their ability. So they, nurses trying to figure out, well, who do I put in? Maybe they promise guys this or that. So I think that's a struggle. But like you said, you got to pick guys and pick a certain style and run with it. Like if you're going to run and have your offense run through your two guards like they did against the Nets in the fourth quarter, that's the offense you're going to run. And it's, been successful, whether it's pick and roll, whatever it is you're going to do, focus on that, whether it's, you know, them doing dribble handoffs with each other, them setting picks for each other. Like you got to find ways to be creative. This team has too much talent on the court on the roster without Joel Embiid playing for them to be 3-13. Full stop. They have to be. He has to figure out his rotations and be more creative in general on
Yeah,
offense and
yeah,
defense, but definitely offense. They have to be more creative. Have to figure out a way.
yeah,
Play fast. Like pace is terrible, and I think that's the most important thing. And hey, if you're rolling with EG, roll with EG for the next 20 games. See if he can get a rhythm. Like that's what you got to do, right? And then if it don't work, okay, you get him out the rotation. Or if it's Ricky or whoever, right? Give them a chance to get in the flow in their specific
yeah,
role, and that's it. And the other guys got to come down into the roles. Caleb Martin has been playing way above his role. Ball handling, main offensive hub. He does have a little bit more juice than I thought he did, but clearly something's wrong with him, right? He's, his shots haven't been good. So when he plays in his role as a defensive stalwart and a player, he looks a lot better and maybe a lot fresher when it comes down to maybe hitting shots or playing a little bit better. But you got to stick with the roles, pick the guys, and go from there. And I really remember truly, excuse me, it was a time where who was it? Furkan wasn't playing well, and it was for a specific stretch of games. And Doc said, "Listen, after this game, we're going with Isaiah Joe." And that's just who's going to be in a rotation from then on. He had already said, he said, all right, get these guys this runway of 30 games, whatever it was. You're not playing well, I'm going to put somebody else. Now, it wound up happening that a bunch of people was out for COVID or something like that, and Furkan wound up going off, and he wound up staying on the rotation. But you got to give the guy those runways and then say to yourself, like, if this guy's not giving us what we need right now, I got to go with somebody else. And then you have opportunity later on down the line to try to make changes to the roster. But the consistency is key. So whether it's Drummond, like you said, gotta if he's going to start, is he not going to start? I'm sure he was expecting to start every game. Joel's not playing and play more. So you got to roll with what you got and go with it as a coach and live with the outcome and make adjustments when necessary. It's a difference between not playing Drummond in a situation where the other team is playing small ball. Cool, right? That makes sense. But just not playing them, not starting them against Zubac when you need size, that's just something where it's just like, I don't know. You got to think, but that's why I'm not paid to be an NBA coach because clearly and apparently these decisions are hard.
yeah. I mean, I think you kind of summarized it pretty fairly. You have to know when to make adjustments. There's I think a little bit of panic going on. The expectations are certainly felt, and the pressure could certainly be on from the front office and the ownership group to probably the chain of screaming as it is. So maybe that's leading to some kind of panic in the rotation, but I think that you have to find some kind of consistency, and I think that the answer lies in the guys who you can you don't know you can trust anyone right now. I think the answer lies in uh, the best shot at guys who you can trust, right? So Tyrese, Jared, you know you can trust them. Gershon, you know you can trust him. Caleb Martin, Caleb is actually, and he's not really, he has barely discussed this publicly. There's something going on with Caleb Martin physically. It is obvious, clear and obvious to anyone who watches him. He is shooting as if he's trying to knock his arm out of his socket. Like there's something going on. He debuted the tape in this last game. He has lightly alluded to it, I should say, to the press. Uh, but he's not really openly spoken about it. The team has not acknowledged either. It is a problem, right? Where Nick has to turn is to guys who have skill sets that can be recovered, that can contribute, right? So Jared McCain, you know you can trust him. He's got a clear and obvious skill set. You're good. Tyrese Maxey, you know you can trust him. Clear and obvious skill set. You're good. Paul George, Joel Embiid, when healthy, you're Kelly Oubre in a consistent, minimized role. You're fine. But when you look at these guys around the outside of the roster, like listen, Kyle Lowry is the only backup point guard that should be playing. Like there should not be minutes going to Jeff Doughton at this point, who I've been a fan of, but Doughton this season certainly has not been living up to the expectations that I have for him. I understand a lot of people don't have high expectations for the guy. He's a two-way player. I have expectations for Doughton, knowing what he's previously been capable of and knowing how Nick feels about Jeff. Jeff should not be playing right now. Kyle should be, as soon as he's healthy, Kyle should be the backup point guard. Reggie Jackson, I like Reggie. Reggie's a really cool guy in person. He has to rein it in because he is overdoing it out there on the court and trying to maximize to a fault every opportunity that he has on the court. So I don't think he's a guy that you can trust. I think a guy like Eric Gordon, who has not been good, mind you, you have a better shot at him recovering his shot than Reggie Jackson becoming an in the pocket player, to use a drumming term. So it's up to Nick to figure out that evaluation. Maybe Reggie Jackson is willing to commit to that, and maybe Reggie becomes an even better backup point guard than Kyle Lowry. I mean, the thing is, you watch Reggie, and there's still clearly some talent there. It's all about how you use it, right? So whether you're talking about Reggie, I think KJ Martin should be playing more personally. I think that they had some early success with that, and he's certainly a flawed player, but his energy, intensity, his rebounding, I think it goes a long way. But whatever Nick decides, he needs to decide something. He can't consistently be switching it up, allow guys to have no idea what they're doing, what's going on, and just say, injuries. And I don't think he wants to go through the rest of the season just injuries. I don't think he wants to be like that either. He's clearly frustrated as well, but it's very clear that something has to change, and hopefully something does. But tomorrow again it's going to be a big step to see there, because otherwise this team is just going to continue falling down the rabbit hole more and more and more. Real quick, we're going to kind of summarize this real fast. Just the what happens if they can't. Justin, I'm going to give my worst case scenario, just kind of like a synopsis, and then I'll have you do the same. But just a quick recap, right? Whole list of guys that they can't trade until December 15th, right? That's the first big date that you have to keep in mind. Certain players who cannot be dealt, guys like KJ Martin, but a lot of guys who cannot be traded until then. January 15th is the biggest day in the NBA for guys to officially be allowed to be dealt. You're at that point seeing a lot of guys who were not only signed but also re-signed, guys who signed extensions. Most everybody is able to be dealt by then, right? There are some exceptions to people who signed extensions at a certain point who can't be dealt for the whole entire season. That's a guy like Joel Embiid. Let's just get that out of the way. So anyone who wants to trade Joel Embiid, it literally cannot happen this season. Cannot. So, if you want to start cooking up trade machine deals for the offseason, if you want to hope he asks out during this offseason, go for it. I personally am of the belief that there is not going to be a situation where the Sixers trade Joel Embiid, or I should say, it is highly unlikely that there's a situation where the Sixers trade Joel Embiid and they end up on the better end of that deal. They end up with a more talented player than Embiid, right? But going through the guys who can be traded when they can get traded, Paul George, December 15th. I don't see him going anywhere, but just to let you guys know. Caleb Martin, 15th. Kelly Oubre, December 15th. Andre Drummond, December 15th. Eric Gordon, the same. Reggie Jackson. Kyle Lowry, Gershon Yabusele, and Adem Bona. Now, that's most of the roster right there. And we've just gotten to the 15th. Those are all the guys who cannot be traded. When you look at who can be traded on the 15th of January, Tyrese Maxey, Kenyon Martin Jr., right? So that kind of fills out almost the rest of the roster because the only two guys who can be now are Jared McCain and Ricky Council. So you're not looking at a lot of options in terms of matching salary, especially under this new CBA. It's going to be incredibly difficult to do anything before that December 15th marker. Even after that, Kenyon Martin, who is the guy who was expected to be dealt, is not able to be dealt until the 15th of January. So you have to wait another month there yet again. Not necessarily the answer is looking like, but of course it depends on what happens with Joel and Paul George, their health in general. The other thing that Philadelphia has going for them would be their draft picks. Obviously, they have their future firsts. They stack some up with the deal with the Clippers. They can offer quite a few. Now, this year, they're potentially going to have their own first-round pick. It is top 6 protected to the Oklahoma City Thunder. If this goes like as bad as it possibly can, and the way that it's going now is how the rest of the season goes, they have the potential to get a top 6 pick. I think that people would like the ability to add one of those players, but that journey would be miserable. So anyone rooting for that, hoping for that, voting for that, it's not going to be a fun time. You're going to bitch and complain the entire way. Just know that going into it. And on top of that, I think it's just early to kind of call the race, right? I mean, listen, I don't want to be Mr. A. It's only 16 games into the season. They're 3-13. People got to get their ass in gear. That's it. Like, you can't play around about that. But at the same time, there is still time for people to get their ass in gear, right? So it's top 6 protected area. So the pick goes to Oklahoma City if it falls outside of the top 6. So what would have to happen is they would have to finish the season with a record within that 6, or I guess really what matters is post lottery, because we just saw this with the Atlanta Hawks. Teams can fly up. Not that I would expect that to be Philadelphia, but wherever they finish, if they're in the lottery, the pick would have to finish in the lottery within the top 6, and then Philadelphia keeps that pick. There's a number of good players in this draft. However, I just don't think that we should be playing for the team to finish with that pick, like with the draft pick. Like, no one should be hoping for that yet. Like, there is still more potential in this terrible Eastern Conference with this team who we have not seen the highs from yet that they have the potential to reach. I'm not telling you they're going to reach them. I'm not telling you that they're going to make it to the finals, that they're going to win the finals. But I'll tell you this, I'd rather write about them trying to than giving up altogether. I mean, Justin, how do you feel?
Because it's been miserable. It's just been miserable right about it now. And so I can only imagine going through that. But I agree with everything you're saying. Like, first of all, the expectations are too high with this roster for them to even think about something like that. Like, you got 3 All-Stars for a reason. You tried to fill out with a bunch of, players that help you win championships, vets, all that stuff. you got to still go for it no matter what. Eastern Conference has been weak besides the top two. Celtics and Cavs, who are both on a crazy run. Um, although the Cavs just always seem fake to me every year, but whatever. That's another, you know, thing for another day. But I just feel like you
I mean,
still got to
don't
go
say
for it.
that
And
because
then what?
the Sixers are playing with, and I won't call them. I won't say the word Keith used for them the other night, but now that they're playing with guards of a similar proportion to Cleveland, I think now we want to root for Cleveland to be legit, so that way there's faith to be had in this backcourt.
No, true, true. And it's like, what are you going to do? Because first of all, they're not going to tank and be the number one. So what are you going to do with like Dylan Harper or Ace Bailey? Like, where they going to fit on a
Shit,
team that's
Dylan.
trying to win
Listen,
a
now
championship?
hold on. Don't make me fight against my own argument here. Talking Dylan Harper, like
No,
Dylan
I
Harper
get it.
could do some stuff with this team. Like you want to roll back with Joel with Paul George next year. Dylan Harper's honestly Cooper Flag's the best guy in this draft. Dylan Harper, not a bad consolation prize. I'll tell you that right now.
I agree. I agree. I'm just saying with the expectations. I don't know. I'm just saying, don't give up on them yet. They do have the assets, but I'll tell you this:
That's for sure.
my one prediction is going to be if they climb up out, if they can climb out this hole by January, like, and by climb out the hole 500 or better, and then it's going to be tough because it might be tough, but they can climb out the hole 500 or better. They won't make a move. They'll wait to the trade deadline because that's what Morey likes to do. If they are 8 games back by the time January 15th, excuse me, 8 games under 500, still by the time January 15th come, somebody's ass is on the plane somewhere else, and they're going to mix it up to try to get some fresh blood in here and try to, change it around. That's definitely going to happen immediately in the middle of January. If they're still back this far, because they're going to try to sprint, right, and try to sprint at the end of the year, and hopefully the guys stay healthy. But if they pull themselves out, I think you'll see them wait until the trade deadline. But if they don't, if they are out of it, people are going to people you didn't think. Like I wouldn't think. I don't know me. I wouldn't think Kelly would be traded, but Kelly might be traded.
You know what, just on the topic of Kelly, and like I said, I think Kelly's really well liked in this locker room, uh,
For sure.
in that proper role. I think that he is a very good player.
Absolutely.
He is not untouchable. I think hardly anyone on this roster is, and this is, take it for what it's worth, coming from a guy who doesn't believe in the word untouchable. Like if we're talking about, like, would you trade LeBron James for Victor Wembanyama? Like I would trade LeBron James in a heartbeat for Victor Wembanyama. If we're talking about LeBron today and Wemby today, obviously, right? So there's always a deal that will get you to move a guy. Giannis has never been untouchable to me. I would not make a move because I know that the move it would take to make me make that move would not come across my desk. And I think that's kind of the situation for a lot of these guys. But Kelly's not subjected to that. Listen,
Mhm.
there's a lot of these guys on this roster. Tyrese Maxey's not going anywhere. Joel Embiid's not going anywhere this season. Unless Paul George has already had it and he demands a trade, he's not going anywhere this season. I don't think Jared McCain is going anywhere this season based on
Yeah.
everything that I've heard. The team is very high on him. That's from multiple people within inside the organization, who have not specifically said they won't trade him, just have talked about how high they are on Jared McCain. So what I will say is, outside of that, your Dre's, your Caleb Martins, your Kelly Oubre's, KJ Martins, obviously. Uh, I don't think they're going to actively look to give up anyone unless the right deal comes across. Like you said, I think Morey will wait till the deadline, as is his typical MO. But it's no one's untouchable. And K1 checks in talking about who wants to finish 500. I get it. I believe me, I very much get it. But the team, and I'm not defending it, I'm just explaining it. The team maintains their position where if they're able to get into the playoffs healthy, they don't care what the record is. So if they finish 41-41, even if they have to play the playing game, which I know they'd rather not, but if they're healthy, they're confident in their ability to win. I think that they're okay with that result. Am I okay with that result? With the way that this season has gone? Not exactly, but kinda is what it is, and, I do believe that this team will be at least a play-in team when it's all said and done. It's gonna take a lot to get to that point, so I understand the frustration. You're not wrong to be frustrated. It's not fun, I get it, and it's hopefully going to improve soon, but I obviously can't promise that. Uh, this team has been so focused on the postseason, and I would say generally, principally, rightfully so, since really the end of last season. Joel obviously mentioned he texted Daryl Morey right away following the season. Whatever I have to do, this, that, the other thing. And we can relitigate that as much as we want. I'd rather not tonight, at least. I need a break if I'm being honest. But the goal now has to be not contending, not playoffs. Let's get 2 or 3 wins in a row. Start small, work your way up from there. Allow your goal to be adaptable. You have to win a couple games in a row, and then you know that you can go on a streak, get that confidence under your belt, remind shooters that they can shoot, and move forward from there. But this is it's not pretty so far. It can get a lot worse. It can get better. Hopefully it does. And we should know tomorrow. Justin, any final thoughts you have for the nice people in the chat?
Man, we enduring it just like y'all. But I'll say this, like Zach said, just gotta stack a couple wins together and things will start feeling better. If they can get 2 or 3 wins together, they'll start feeling better, start feeling like normal, and the outlook could easily change that quickly. So they have a schedule that can do it. They just gotta do it.
They just got to do it. You heard it here first. All right. Well, thank you so much for checking in with us. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much to everyone in the chat for participating. Eric R. We got K1, Chris Babos, PSN's own, obviously, Dave Melandra. Thank you so much, Jay Fizz, obviously, Eloy. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for listening, participating, and we're really looking forward to. I said looking forward to again. We are looking forward to talking to you, great people, again. We will be willing to discuss the Sixers while we talk with you in the future. So for now, thank you so much for joining in. It's been Zach, been Justin, another episode of Still Processing, a 76ers podcast.